Hello and welcome. It is that time of year. The season is upon us, and with that is a preview of the season ahead. The Dame deal is now done, so I figure things are finally finalized. The Brooklyn Nets have been proactive with a bunch of low-risk, high-reward deals that obviously has contributed to a very new, revamped team that Nets fans can root for. I love to scroll Nets Twitter because there's quite a lot of diehards roaming those lands, but it is what has helped create the basis for this video today. We're going to be doing the season preview, more so predictions, but we're going to be doing it in the form of answering a series of prompts as per this tweet by Brooklyn85. Here are the prompts if you want to answer the same questions, some, if not all, questions in the comments. I think it would make for some very interesting discussion because of how open-ended they are. Let's go. Number one is Breakout Net of the Year. And last year, my awful take of Dayron breaking out never came to fruition. Yet I feel like this time is the time. That backup big spot was never addressed via trade. So I think this is a signal from Sean Marks that Dayron is ready to go. We're an awful rebounding team, as the numbers would suggest from last season, especially on the defensive glass. Our woeful rebounding percentages were a huge part of that. And look, Dayron's number one attribute is rebounding, so I think it would really help address that. I think our improvement as a whole is highly dependent on improving that part of our game. And I think Dayron, who says he's been in the lab, is obviously cut down a little bit, is the guy fit to change the trend. I also think this is aided by Jacques Vaughn's comments about drop coverage and us implementing that into our defensive scheme. I think players like Dayron and Clax are going to be very much the beneficiary of that defensive scheme. Number two, will Clax and Ben end the season as Nets? I answer yes to both of them. The only reason Clax goes is in the case that there is an offer for someone that would severely elevate our ceiling. However, I don't think a Donovan Mitchell type for the need he would address in our backcourt is worth giving up a far more important piece in our front court. Clax holds down our defense. You lose him and all of a sudden our rebounders are of the small ball variety, or you've got a player like Darius Bazley who isn't exactly built, nor is he a center. Does Donovan make up what we would lose in defense in scoring? I highly doubt it, and I'm not willing to find out. Clax does have a sizable jump in him. I mean, Defensive Player of the Year, could he possibly reach those heights? I mean, he's got a chip on his shoulder from getting snubbed from the all-defensive team and potentially being around the mark for Defensive Player of the Year. Top 5 center in the league? Who knows? I mean, there has been stress on his offensive game in the offseason. There's potential for this to come to fruition. As for Ben, the stocks for him are low. He's still got a year left on his deal after this season, so I think we hold until then. And even with a much improved season, I think we hold on to him anyway. He has been spoken of highly by his teammates and the coaching staff, who laud the confidence that he is displaying in training. So obviously actions speak louder than words, but that is a reason for optimism. And thus I am buying into the Ben Simmons stock this season. I do think we see a better version of Ben this season. Granted, that isn't hard to do because of the standard he has set recently for himself. Number three, Nets finish at the blank seed. Look, I'm going to send them into a little bit of a lower bracket than last season. I do think they hover in the play-in spots, 7 to 10, anywhere in that region. I can see a couple of teams moving up the ranks from below us. I think the Pacers are like what they're cooking, so I think they could be a mover. And I do feel the Heat, even though they've lost quite a few pieces, have a lot more room for consistency, so I think they could be a mover as well. That being said, there hasn't been a lot of notable movement in the East if we're talking about transactions. And the teams that have been active, at least recently, with the Dame trade, Jrue Holiday getting shipped off to the Celtics, I mean, that's not going to affect us at all. Last year, a 500 record got you 9th. The season before it would land you 10th and 11th. And then in the 72 game season, it got 7th. So I think where we lie is going to be much more indicative of how teams are performing against those teams that they're playing in the West. And obviously how the East are tracking collectively as a whole. I think it could be another one of those seasons where there's going to be a lot of congestion between all those Eastern Conference teams, and because of how loaded the West is as well. Do think, though, we'll be very closely on the right or wrong side of that 41 win marker that would get you 500, a 500 record. I think 37 to 45 wins is the range I'm looking at. I think we'll cook on defense, but we're going to cancel that out because of the inconsistency and struggles we may face on offense. You know, Dennis Smith Jr., Claxton, Cam Johnson and Ben Simmons last season, if we look at defensive plus minus, were in the 95th percentile or higher. And that's defensive estimated plus minus. But we also kept opponents to the 4th lowest effective field goal percentage in the league last season. So obviously you bring in all those players that we've acquired that fit the defensive mold we're going for, and we could have a very elite defense on our hands. Number 4, Mikal Bridges over under 24.5 points. I'm going to say over, but only just. I think Mikal leads this team. He did prove himself as a 3-level scorer last year. He was excellent in the mid-range. And outside of the playoffs where things didn't come as organically, he was generally quite efficient and tough to contain with his length. I think there's going to be a ton of opportunities in transition as well. I don't think he's going to be the one to take it downhill to the cup in those situations, but I do think there will be catch and shoot or pull up 3 opportunities for him to capitalize on, especially given the defense won't be set in those sort of situations. I do think that this is going to be a season where Mikal starts at one extreme, so he may start extremely hot or extremely cold, and then things will even out over time as his form improves, or obviously it wanes. Number 5, Cam Johnson over under 17.5 points. And this is a really tough one for me because we saw glimpses of Cam Johnson as a 3-level scorer, and he did perform well in the playoffs against Philly. I do have concerns about his usage though. Is he going to exceed that 10 to 12 shot threshold that he would constantly reach last season but never really go over and extend the boundaries? Obviously, it's the kind of player he is. He's not known to have a ton of the ball in an offensive set. A season ago, he did have some good handles, and I would hope the Nets utilize that a little bit more. And as we mentioned previously with Mikal, we are going to have an abundance of opportunities in transition with the stacked defense we have, and hopefully that's going to open the door for some more opportunities for CJ to get some shots up. I'm going to say just under at 16 a game. Number 6, the most disappointing net. This one is a really difficult one to define because it depends on expectation and the standards we set for the given player. And look, given we have a bunch with a chip on their shoulder, something to prove, those kinds of players that haven't been really given a chance, it's sort of a tough one to pick. But I'm gonna say Royce O'Neale is the recipient of this award. It's not an award, obviously you don't want these credits. Obviously he's there to do 2 things. Play defense, shoot threes. Make those threes, by the way. I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I was at times last season. He would hit, you know, some clutch shot after shooting 1 of 8 previously. But in a team with no clear number 1, Royce isn't getting those kinds of looks he was getting with KD and Kyrie on the team. Royce doesn't really have any shot creating capabilities, or he's got very minimal, and he was getting severely beaten off the dribble by guards when he'd switch onto them in the pick and roll action. I'm gonna predict he has a very tough season from 3, shooting at 33%, and I do think his stocks will fall as a defender. I do think that a good defensive system may paper over the cracks in his game, but where we need everyone to chip in on offense this season, I don't think he's going to fit the bill. Some are saying Spencer Dinwiddie is going to be the most disappointing. I think Ben Simmons holds the key to Dinwiddie's ceiling this season. if Ben rediscovers that imposing presence that an optimal performance from him would provide, Spencer is a much better three-point shooter on the catch. I suspect if Ben is performing, Spencer will get a lot of good looks and he will knock them down, as opposed to those bullshit sidestep threes that make my eyes bleed. Number 7, over under 1.5 trades made this year by the Nets. I'm going to say over. Obviously, a lot of cheap contract players on expiring deals, and pieces valuable to contenders on this roster. I do think Sean Marks is a sensible guy. I do think Sean Marks will hold off and be conservative, but I can 100% see 2 trades happening this season. Dinwiddie, Royce, DFS, maybe one of the incomers from the offseason could, be shipped off or combined in potential trade packages in certain combinations. Even an unhappy Cam Thomas could force his way out. That's not completely out of the question either, given the uncertainty of his playing time, which seems to have transferred over from last season. Number 8, the boldest prediction for the Nets season. This is a very difficult one because there's a lot of different possibilities that could arise from the uncertainty of our roster, who's playing, what they can bring. My call is that Trendon Watford is going to nail down a spot in the rotation. In the case that we trade Royce or DFS, I'd like to think that Jalen Wilson could have the same kind of effect and replicate the same kind of thing. But I do think the upside for Watford is huge. He brings a lot of passing ability. He can shoot threes on a reasonable clip. I think it was 39% last year or 37%, one of those. He's that unique build where he's too strong for guards and too fast for bigs. So I think Jacques Vaughn, for the versatility his roster oozes, is going to enjoy playing Watford. And he didn't win the G League MVP for nothing as well. Obviously he can play. I think he's the perfect fit and player for the system we're trying to build, the kind of system we want to play. And usually Jacques Vaughn loves players and rewards players that can bring that special something. So I think Trendon Watford could be one of our fan favorites, doing things to the same effect that Edmund Sumner, Yuta Watanabe, and Drew Smith even at times last season all achieved. Those little intangible things. I also feel as if Harry Giles, a player who the Nets have been high on for so long, could be another one of these under the radar type performers. Number 9, Claxton, over under 9 threes made for the season. I think he exceeds this mark because I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by what he brings on this front over the course of the season. He's been one who has constantly shown dedication to fast track his development and work on his weaknesses. He's put on the pounds in a commitment to be stronger in the post, under the basket, on the glass, in terms of boxing out, but he's also definitely been working on his jump shot. Every time footage surfaces, his jump shot looks pretty decent. The form, look, do I think he's going to take a ton of threes each game? No. But I can see him over the course of the season attempting maybe 40 to 50 and making like 13 to 14. If you did the math, 13 makes from 50 attempts is 26%. I think that's pretty achievable. Definitely a reasonable target to set, very acquirable, especially if initially oppositions aren't giving him the respect he deserves. And I do think if that's the case, and it does take a little bit more time for oppositions to get a bearing of how well he's shooting the ball from 3, I do think he'd be able to fast track getting to that over of 10 very quickly, or much, much quicker. I did see one comment on Twitter relating to Claxton adding a jump shot to his arsenal and how that would make him a Bosch Chandler hybrid. If we get somewhere near that mark, I think we'll be okay. Number 10, and the final prompt, Ben Simmons over under 10.5 points a game. I'm going to say no. I do think Ben doesn't fully get back to being himself, but I do think we're going to see glimpses of his past much more frequently. I do think inconsistency is going to be there, and there may be some injury struggles or like little things to overcome along the way. But I do think, mark my words, it's going to be on the record now, Ben will have 4 to 6 games where he scores 20 or more. I think if you mix that in with the inconsistency he may feel, I think he's going to average about 9 or 10 points a game. Apparently, he looks a bit of a beast in transition, so I'll give him a few points there. But obviously, last season, he was scared to embrace the contact. Even if he'd have like a 6'1" guard, you know, the only thing in his way as he was going downhill. And he could very easily muscle his way to the basket. He would just pass that opportunity up. Obviously, we can't anticipate his mentality unless we asked him, but I do expect the confidence to slowly seep back in. The confidence is there. Spencer Dinwiddie said that he sees Ben Simmons as a leader in terms of where this team heads this season. And you would only say that with evidence to back it up. I definitely think we can see him pushing a triple-double, maybe 10 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, but he's only averaging 8 or 9 shots a game, I reckon. So whilst I don't think he hits the over, I think he gets very close. Well, that's going to do it for a very differently styled preview kind of video. I want to stress I will be doing watch parties over the course of the regular season. So especially if you can't access games, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for that when I go live, as I slowly work to regrow a nice little Nets community, which together can track a very interesting time for the Nets. There is a full playlist of watch-alongs from last season, so if you want to know what you're signing up for, make sure to check one of those out. And I'd love to hear your take on all of these topics that we've just discussed, so let's get a conversation going in the comments. But that'll be all from me. We are going to be churning out a little bit of content in the weeks before the season, as much as time permits, so stay tuned. But for now, have a great rest of your day. Speak to you soon, and bye for now.